Please go to EliTheComputerGuy.com in order to view schematics, code, and more for the projects that you are learning about. Welcome back. So one of the big uses for Arduino projects is to tell end users when there is a problem. So let's say you have a server room, you're worried about the server room overheating, and so you put in some kind of LED light system. So basically, if the temperature is below a certain level, the light is green. If the temperature goes above a certain level, the light is red, right? That's the type of project that you can do with an Arduino. But one of the problems comes up is what happens if there's not a user there to visually see whatever type of notification that you're trying to present. So what if somebody is not looking at a web browser to see a notification event? What happens if a user is not even in the building to see an LED turn on or turn off? Wouldn't it be nice if your Arduino project could send you a notification using SMTP, basically using email services? So whatever email client you have, whether you have a desktop computer, whether you have some kind of smartphone, or whether you even have a smart watch, you can get notifications no matter where in the world you are, what time of day it is, so on and so forth. And so the project that I'm going to show you how to do today is we're going to use a simple analog temperature sensor, and when the temperature gets above a certain level, what's going to happen is our Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi is going to post to a PHP script on a server, and then that server is going to send out an email using the mail function within PHP. And once that email is sent out, then I can receive the email on whatever email client that I am using. So the important components that we're going to be needing for this project today was we're going to use the Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi that we have been using. I am going to be using a simple analog temperature sensor. Now it is important to understand I use the analog temperature sensor because it's just a very easy sensor to use and give it thresholds for code within the Arduino. But realize you can use any sensor. Basically, you can state if a sensor triggers or the value gets to a certain height or certain low, you can trigger an event to happen. So it is important to realize that. But so we're using the Arduino Uno, we're using a basic analog temperature sensor, and then what we're going to use is we're going to use the post function within the post ability within the Arduino Uno Wi-Fi to post up to a PHP script on a shared hosting plan. So it is important to understand with this project that I am using a shared hosting plan from GoDaddy, and there's a reason I'm using a shared hosting plan from GoDaddy. In order to send out the email, we are going to use a PHP function simply called mail. So if you're using the PHP scripting language, there is a function that you can use called mail, and what that mail function does is you give it the variables that you're giving it, and then it uses whatever the default email service for that server is to be able to send out the emails. When you're building your web server, you install Apache, you install MySQL, you install PHP. Well, one of the things that's installed by default on most shared hosting platforms is also an email service. So they have already installed the email service, they have already configured the email service, they have already done all of that. So when you call the mail function within PHP, it simply uses all of that to send out the SMTP message. So it is important to understand that if you decide to build your own LAMP server to do this project, you're going to have to install your own email services, and that can be a pain in the butt. To be polite, it can be a pain in the butt. This is one of those times, especially if you are learning, you're not planning to put this into a production environment, I would highly recommend you simply spend $5 a month for a shared hosting plan. Again, whether it's GoDaddy or HostGator, I don't care who it is, spend a couple of dollars so that you don't have to build your own server for this particular project, but this is just something to keep in mind. So even if you have a LAMP server, even if you have a full web server with PHP installed, if you send the post to that server, to the script on that server will not be able to use the mail function unless you have configured the email services on that server. So just keep that in mind with this project. We are going to be using a shared hosting plan, and that's what I would highly recommend for you, especially if you're learning. And honestly, even if you're not learning, if this isn't high security, if it's not high security type messaging that you're doing, honestly, I just pay $5 a month for a shared hosting plan just so I don't have to worry about it. But, That's me. So with that, let's go over, take a look how to physically build this project, and then I will show you the code, both the Arduino code and the PHP code that's required to make this project function. So this is the physical build for our project, and you have probably seen this physical build a number of times before if you've been watching my other videos. Again, all we're doing is we're using an analog temperature sensor, and we're using this in order to get dynamic readings to be able to trigger events to happen based off of those readings. Again, you could have motion sensors here, you could have distance sensors here, you could have all kinds of different sensors here. I'm just simply using a temperature sensor because it gets the point across. So we have the analog temperature sensor. We have this coming to 5 volt for power. We have this going to ground for ground. And then the sensor pin for this particular project, we are using A5, but you could use A0 through A5. I just used A5 for this. Now we are going to be powering this off of our computer today. So I'm going to be plugging this into the computer. This will give us power and will also allow us to see what's going on with the serial monitor. But do realize that if you don't need the serial monitor functionality, you could simply have this plugged in using a normal 12 volt connection or some kind of other USB power supply and have this completely separated from a computer. So you could just put this powered up into your server room, and then everything that I'm showing you today will work so long as it's able to actually connect to the Wi-Fi network. So with that, let's go over and start taking a look at the code. So when we're looking at this project, it is important to remember that we're going to be writing 2 different programs. So we're going to be writing a sketch for the Arduino, and then for our shared hosting server, we're also going to be writing a PHP script. So this is, again, one of the reasons why I laugh so hard when people ask what one language they should learn if they want to be a coder. Because in reality, even something as simple as what I'm showing you today actually uses multiple languages in order to make this thing work. So I really want you to start realizing that when you start thinking about coding, when you start thinking about the IoT world, it's not about learning one product or one language. It's about learning all the different tools that are required in order to get done whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So first, let us go and take a look at the sketch. So this is the Arduino Sketch that I've created, and this sketch is what will be uploaded to the Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to include the library for the Wi-Fi, for the Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi. So we use Wi-Fi 9 for most of my projects here. Then we need to define the sensor pin. So we're simply defining the analog pin A5 as the sensor pin. So this is where we'll be getting readings for the temperature sensor. The next thing that we need to do is we need to give the information for how to connect to the Wi-Fi network. So we have char, SSID, and I have a guest network called test, and that guest network has no password. Again, I do this to make my life easier so I don't have to troubleshoot networking problems while I'm trying to do something else. If you have a password or whatever else, you would plug that password in there. Then we're going to come down, we're going to create a variable for status for the Wi-Fi network, and we're basically going to set it to idle. So this is for when we're trying to connect to the Wi-Fi network. This is used for the while loop for trying to connect. Then we're going to come down for the server. And so char server. So this is the server that we are going to be connecting to. So for today, I'm actually using the failnormal.com server. So it's www.failnormal.com. Now it is important to understand is I am not putting any folder structure here. I am not putting the script information here. I am simply putting the server that I'm pointing at. So www.failnormal.com, www.elithecomputerguy.com, whatever the domain name is for your server, just put that there. You do not put the folder, you do not put the script name, you don't put anything else there. Then we're going to come down, we're going to create a string for post data. So post data is the data that we are actually going to be sending to the server for that post. So we just create that variable there. And then I'm also creating a string, and I'm going to call it a post variable, and it's going to be temp equals. So basically this is simply the name of the post variable that I'm sending. So temp equals 86, temp equals 76, Temp equals 102. So basically, when I send the information in a post, I have to say what the variable name is, so that I can pull out what the value for the variable name is. So here, that variable name, the variable name is actually temp, and then it's going to be equals. So I just put that all here together. So whatever your variable name is, you know, time equals, distance equals, whatever else. Then we're going to come down. We're going to set up the client. So Wi-Fi client. Again, this is just simply required for the Wi-Fi network. Copy and paste, shove it in there. Now that we've done that, we have to set up our environment. So we go into void setup to set up the environment. The first thing that we're going to do is serial.begin 9600 to start the serial monitor. This is mainly just for troubleshooting purposes. Then we're going to go into the while loop. This while loop is what connects us to the Wi-Fi network. So while status does not equal wireless link connected, serial print, blah, 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 Wi-Fi.begin. And this is the function to provide the SSID and the password to try to connect to the Wi-Fi network. It keeps looping through there until that it actually connects, and then once it actually connects to the Wi-Fi network, it breaks out. Same thing as normal. Then what we have down here is we're simply going to print out to the serial monitor some basic information, so we know a little bit about what's going on with our Arduino. So we're going to print out the SSID, so what the SSID is, and we're also going to print out the IP address. So once it's been connected, it'll say it is connected to this SSID, it's connected to test, and this is what the IP address is in case we need that. So now we're going to go down and we are going to go into the loop. That's actually going to provide the cool functionality, right? So the first thing in this loop is we have the simple copy and paste math here for coming up with a temperature. So in order to, you have to grab the voltage value, you have to grab the value that the analog temperature sensor is providing, and then you do a bunch of math on that to turn into a temperature in Fahrenheit. This is that math. Again, we've talked about it before in other projects. Copy and paste it. If you want to learn more about it, go take a look at those other projects. Then we're going to come down here and we're going to take this post data variable, so that string that we created up here, the string post data, and we are going to make it equal to post variable. So it's going to be equal to temp equals, and then plus. So what this does is it's called concatenation. So concatenation is when you kind of super glue things on to the end of each other. So what this is going to do is it's going to do temp equals, and then the value for temperature F. So we create a variable, temperature F here. So this is the temperature Fahrenheit. And so we are going to do temp equals whatever the value of temperature F is. There's no space, there's nothing there. This is all just sandwiched together. And that becomes our post data, and that is what will be posted to the server. Then we're going to come down here to the actual if statement. And so for our if statement, we have if temperature F is greater or equal to 80. So 80 degrees is what I figure is too high a temperature. If that happens, then what we're going to do is we are going to connect and we are going to send the post data. So then it'll say if client.connect server at 80. So server is up here. So that's www.failnormal.com, and 80 is the port, right? So if client.connect, so if it can connect to www.failnormal.com at port 80, then go through and do the rest of this. So then we're going to do client. So this is sending out to the client that you've connected to. So this is sending out to that web server that you're connecting to. It's sending to www.failnormal.com. Very important. When we're talking about printing, it's important who you're printing to. So this is printing out to the client you connected to. Serial is printing out to the serial monitor. So once we've connected, we're going to client.println. So we're sending, and it's going to be a post. So we're going to say post, and then this is where we put in the folder structure and the script that we're actually pointing at. So I have created a folder called test on failnormal.com, and then the PHP script we were sending this post data to is email script.php, and then we're simply saying it's HTTP 1.1. So this is where you put that folder structure and the actual script that you're sending this to. Again, remember this is PHP and everything else, so things like capitalization does matter, so make sure all your capitalization is right. Anyways, so we're going to post. Then we're going to say the host. So what is the host? We just put in the www.failnormal.com. So host and server should remain the same. Then we're going to do client.println content type. So we're going to be telling it what type of content this is. And so we're saying form URL encoded. That's for the post. Then we're going to tell it how long the data is, the content length. And that's what we do here. We have a variable for figuring out what the content length that we're sending it to. Again, at this point, this is just copy and paste. And then finally, after we do all of that, we actually send the post data. So client.print post data, and that post data is going to be temperature equals whatever the value of temperature F is, and that will be sent up there. Then what we're going to do is on this serial monitor, so this is serial print line, just so I know that this has occurred, we will print out email sent. So we'll say email sent, print line, and then it'll print another line and tell us what the value of temperature F is, just so we know when it got sent, again, if we're doing any kind of troubleshooting here. Then, if the client is still connected, then the client is going to stop. Again, this is copy and paste. Now, one of the things that's not copy and paste here is this delay. And this is something you're going to have to think about as a coder. And this is going to be your decision. You can do whatever the hell you want right here. But basically, we need some type of limiter. Remember that when you're dealing with Arduino, Arduino just keeps looping. Looping, right? And so if you look at this, if you don't put any kind of delay in here, guess what's going to happen as soon as the temperature goes above 80 degrees in your server room? You are going to get spammed to high hell and back, because it is going to run through this every time it loops. So if it's above 80 degrees, it'll send an email, send an email, send an email, send an email, send an email. And all of a sudden, you've literally got 1,000 emails in your mailbox, right? Because basically, if it's above 80, then I'm sending the post. It goes to the PHP script. The PHP script fires off the email. That's not useful to anybody. So what I have done here is I've put in a delay of 60,000. So 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. So 60,000 milliseconds equals basically 1 minute, 60 seconds. So what's going to happen is if the temperature goes above 80, it will do all of this right here, and then it will simply sit. It will delay for 1 minute. Now, what type of limiting system you do, that's all on you. Again, when I do these projects, I try to make these projects as simple as possible so you understand what's going on. If I was going to put this into a production environment, I would figure out something a hell of a lot more complicated than simply 60,000 milliseconds, but this is something that's very easy to understand. So this limiter here, you could create some kind of timer. So you could have some kind of timer and then measure the timer thing. You could actually put some kind of limiter within the PHP script itself. There are a lot of different ways you could put some kind of limiter there. The main thing that you have to think about is basically how are you not going to spam the hell out of yourself if the temperature goes above 80 degrees. Again, you may, even something as simple as, I don't know, maybe put this to 300,000. You know, maybe that limits it to going every 5 minutes. But you'll have to think about something, especially in the real world. Because again, if this starts triggering and then it takes you, it takes you half an hour to figure out what the problem is, you're going to get spammed to high hell and back. So you got to figure out some kind of limiter here. I've simply put that 1 minute limiter. Then out of this, we're going to do serial.println post data. So the main use for this is if this doesn't fire, basically it's just going to print out as it loops through. It'll tell us what the current post data is. So we'll say temperature equals 72, temperature equals 74, and then I have a simple delay on the overall script of about 3 seconds. 3,000 milliseconds, 3 seconds, and I'll show you how that works once we've powered everything up and we have the serial monitor going. Okay, so this is going to be sending this information, this post information, to www.failnormal.com/test email script.php. So let's go over and take a look at the email script. Now again, whenever you're dealing with PHP, do realize you can simply write PHP in any kind of text editor you want. A lot of times, especially for these projects, I will show you this in a basic text editor because I think it's easier and more comfortable for especially new people to be able to work with. But you can use IDEs or whatever else. But literally, I'm simply using text edit on a Mac in order to write this. So this is going to be put up in the test folder, sitting signing up there at failnormal.com. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to open the PHP script. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable for time. And so we're going to make $. So when you're dealing with PHP, every variable has to have a $sign in front of it, just one of those quirks of PHP. And so we're going to create a variable called time, and we're going to make it equal to the time code function. So basically the time code function, this just gives numbers. So the time as the computer sees it. It's not actually that useful for most people. I sometimes simply use a pure time variable just for troubleshooting purposes to make sure things are auto-updating, where I'll put the time variable in there just so I can see the number changes every time I refresh the page, because that's all I care about. But one of the things is in the real world, you may actually have to have time in a format that makes sense to a normal human being. And so what we're going to do here is then we're going to create the timestamp variable. Timestamp variable is going to be equal to, there's something called the date function. So the date function, and in the date function, what we're going to say is we want to make this 24 hours. So we want to turn time. So we're going to feed the time variable. We want to format this in 24 hours with the minutes with the seconds. So what this date function is going to do is it's going to give us a timestamp in the 24-hour format. If you want to learn more about this, you can just take a look at the time function in PHP. But the main thing here is we just need a value for this timestamp variable that is useful to a normal human being. Then the next thing that we're going to do, the next variable that we're going to do is we're actually going to create the $tempf variable. So the temperature Fahrenheit variable, and we're going to make it equal to $_post, all capitals, bracket, double quotation marks, temp, right? So back in this Arduino script, right, when we came up here and we created this variable, so the post variable temp, that's what we're grabbing here. We're grabbing the value that has been posted from temp, and we're turning that into the value for the variable $tempf. Then past that, we're going to go down and we have to give the mail function the values for variables that it needs. So the first thing is $2 equals, and then we have to give an email address that we're going to be sending this email to. So I've created a test email account, simply test@geekvid.com, and so this is who the email is going to be sent to. Then we do $subject equals, and so this is simply going to be the subject line, and I'm going to have temperature alert here. You could have something else. I just put temperature alert. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have a message. So what is the message? And so this gets a little convoluted, a little bit, there's some concatenation in here. Again, we're super gluing some things together. So the message is going to equal double quotation marks at. So we're going to say at : space, the value of timestamp. So at 340, at 220, at whatever else, right? Then we're going to say at, and then we do a period. So within PHP, concatenation is done with a period. We're going to put the value of $timestamp. Then we're going to concatenate to the end of that. We're going to super glue onto the end of that using period. And then double quotation marks. We're going to put a space in there. The temperature reached, right? Space, double quotation marks. Then we're concatenating again. We're using that little period and whatever the value for temperature F is. So at 240, the temperature reached 95 degrees, right? Or it would just be 95, actually. We didn't put degrees in there. And so this is the message that will be sent, and that's where you're using that little concatenation to duct tape things together. Then the final thing is the headers, so some additional headers that you can put in for the email. So for this, what I'm going to do is from : and we're going to say alert system at etcg.com. So basically, who is this from? Now do realize for hacking purposes, I'm just saying this is not a hacking video, but if somebody was going to do a hacking video, just realize this is literally, the from is literally just text. I put in whatever the hell I want. So I'm putting alert system at etcg.com. So one of the things that this can be useful for is, let's say you have rules in your email box. So messages from this email address go here or get forwarded here or something else happens. So that's that's one of the things you can use for multiple layers of how this whole system can work, is you could plug in a specific email address here basically as something to use for those rules to know what your email client should do with the message coming in. But I'm just simply doing alert system at etcg.com, so I can see that it's there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do the mail function. So this is the mail function, and basically the mail function, all we're going to do is we're just going to feed it the values of the variables that we've created. So we're going to do the mail function. It is going to be 2, the value for 2, the value for subject, the value for message, and then it is kind of weird, the value for headers. So do just realize headers, for whatever reason, is after message. Again, it's just how it is. This is how it works. Then, of course, we do the semicolon at the end. You're going to notice here, I have this print script ran time. And so for print, this actually prints out to a web page. So I can go directly to this script. And if I go directly to the script, it will fire off the script. And I'm using this as a troubleshooting tool just to make sure the script is actually firing. I'll show you that in a second. But this is the code that's required for this particular project. So with that, let me actually power up the board and upload the code, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, so I've uploaded the script and I've powered up the board, and so now the Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi is reading the temperature readings, and we can actually make this script work. Now, one of the things I want to show you before we get into that is I do want to show you this little troubleshooting routine that I use, and this is the type of thing I use. We probably don't want this in the production environment, but again, when you're just troubleshooting, trying to make sure everything's working, this can be useful. So basically, if I call the script directly, right? So if I go www.failednormal.com, then I go /test, it's in the folder test, and then I do email script.php, right? And then I hit enter. Why I put that little code in there is this is what we'll see. So script ran at, basically it says 2:57:35. So 2 o'clock 57 minutes in the afternoon. And so the important thing for me here is that the script is actually running. You want to make sure, again, like when you do these scripts, I mean, did you screw up capitalization? Did you forget the frickin' PHP tags, or to close the PHP tags? One of the things you want to know is whether or not the script is actually running. So I put this in here just to verify that the script is actually running. Now, one of the things that you will notice is the time seems weird. You're like, well, wait a minute, Eli, that's a weird timestamp. So that's the timestamp, but this says basically 2 o'clock or almost 3 o'clock here, and this says 11 o'clock here. Well, remember, this timestamp is going to be based off of whatever the server time is. So whatever time you've set in your server, so actually in the server itself. So within Linux, your web server, whatever the time is, that's what the time function is going to use as the time. So one of the problems you can run into, like my issue here, is because I use a shared hosting plan, I can't change the time of that main server. So something that you just may have to realize if you're going to be using a shared server is realize the difference in time between what that server is telling you and what your actual time is. You may just have to get that in your head. Again, if you get an email alert that says an event happened in the future, it didn't actually happen in the future, it's just the time on the server. So anyways, let's go over, take a look at the Arduino. So we got the Arduino here. We're going to go to Tools. We are going to go to Serial Monitor. And so we're seeing it's trying to connect to the network name test. This is the basic normal thing that it goes through. Then a few seconds, we'll get our nice little IP address, and then it'll start spitting out the temperatures. Okay, so yeah, SSID is test. IP address is 172.16.42.5. Now, one of the things that I've done here is I've turned on the show timestamp. Again, for me, this is just something useful for troubleshooting purposes, especially like when I do send the email to make sure that it only pauses for 60 seconds for 1 minute. So what we can see right now is since the temperature is below 80 degrees, it's looping through, and every 3 seconds it's telling us what the temperature is. So temp equals equals 7120. Temp equals 70.32, so on and so forth. So if I go over here and I put my finger on the temperature sensor, we will then see the temperature goes up to 78.23. And then once it goes above 80, now we see it says email sent, temperature equals 83.50. So that temp equals 83.50. The temp is the variable name, and then the 83.50 is the value. And so in the post, that's where we're going to be able to grab the value for the variable in the PHP script. Then all we're going to do is we're going to go over to our email client. So I simply have our workspace up. Let me see, do a refresh. And we have an alert here. So let's go and take a look at the alert. Okay, so this alert here, so this is the alert that I got from running the test, right? So when I went to this script, remember when I went to this script, but I didn't actually give any post information, the script ran and there was no value for the variable temperature F. So when I go and I take a look at the email, this is what we get. At, again, 2:57, the temperature reached nothing. And the reason it reached nothing is because I called the script directly and did not give it any post information. I go back to inbox, let me do a refresh. There we go. Now we have received this current alert. So the current alert, we click on this. So this is what we actually are getting from the Arduino Uno Wi-Fi as of this moment. So at 1500, so basically 3 o'clock, the temperature reached 83.50. And so I can say, oh no, look at that, the temperature reached 83 degrees. I need to do something about it. So basically the temperature sensor with the Arduino, at this point it paused, right? It paused for, at this point it paused for 60 seconds. So it paused for 60 seconds and then waits in order to run through the loop again. If the temperature had continued to be above 80 degrees, it would have then sent me another email at the 60-second mark, and then another email after that, and another email after that, and another email after that. Since we can see that the temperature went down, then it stopped sending emails, and so we got that one email. And so really, that's all there is for this particular project, and it's just important to understand that you're able to use Arduino. So you write the Arduino Sketch, then that is able to post up to a server. Again, we're using a shared hosting, just the Linux server. We're able to post up to a PHP script, and then that PHP script is able to use the mail function on the Linux server to then send you an email. And overall, it's a pretty simple system that works pretty well. So that's all there is to this very simple project, right? So we have our Arduino Uno with Wi-Fi, we have an analog temperature sensor, we're able to post up to a web server. That web server then takes that post information using a PHP script, uses the mail function, and then spits out an email. But this is one of the things that I want you to understand about the real world of technology. A lot of people like to complain about the types of videos that I do, and they say, oh, Eli, the videos that you do are so simple. Why don't you talk about real technology? And what I want you to understand is real technology is simple. It's a lot of very simple components that you duct tape together into a complex system. So building a lamp server is pretty simple. Doing a PHP script is pretty simple. Writing an Arduino Sketch and connecting a temperature sensor is pretty simple. But when you're trying to tie all these things together, communicate over a network, make sure everything functions how it needs to function in a production environment, that's when it gets complicated. A whole bunch of very simple things come together to make something complex. Now again, I will warn you, if you're going to be doing this project, if you don't have a server that's built with email functionality already set up, I would highly recommend you just use a shared hosting platform, shared hosting server. Again, $3, $5, whatever per month. I think it will make your life a hell of a lot easier. And again, even if you're running production stuff, something to think about is how secure those communications really have to be. because if it's just like stupid ass notifications, simply just bouncing it through a shared hosting server might make your life a hell of a lot easier too. Because if you're running through a shared hosting server, you don't have to worry about power supplies failing. You don't have to worry about a lot of weird things going on. So this is just something to keep in mind. Now, issues that you may run into using the mail function on a shared hosting server is depending on how stringent your anti-spam measures are within your enterprise. These email messages may be caught and may be shoved in the spam bin by your whatever spam services that you're using. Since you're not using like a real email account, you're not sending from a normal email account with everything that goes along with that, it may be flagged as spam. So that's just something to keep in mind. When I do this using Google or using any of the normal email services, the emails come through fine. So you just, depends on what spam services you're using. If you're using some kind of very stringent spam service, you may simply not get the email at all. It may just simply delete it for whatever reason. Again, because as I showed you, it could be a phishing attack. Remember that from? All that from is text. I could put in whatever the hell, I could put in support@bankofamerica.com. So there's a reason why a spam system would simply delete this type of thing, because literally what I just showed you could be a type of phishing attack if you wanted to build it that way. So one, if you're using a stringent spam system, just realize you may not get your email messages. Or two, if you're not using such a stringent spam system, this may also just simply get dropped into your spam box. Again, whether you're using Gmail or Outlook or something else, because it's not a normal email service, it may get dumped in your spam box. So you may have to look in your spam, and then you may have to say this is not spam and go from there. So that's the only real kind of hiccup you might run into with this. The other thing is also making sure with your shared hosting plan that it does do the mail function with PHP. It does have the email services. One of the reasons that I used failnormal.com versus EliTheComputerGuy.com for this particular project is because with EliTheComputerGuy.com, I actually use email services, custom email services on that particular server. So when I try to run the mail function there, it fails out because of other configurations that I've set up. So one of the reasons I went with failnormal.com is that particular server is a pretty vanilla server. It's set up normally, so I didn't run into the same issues. So those are some of the things that you may have to work with if you're going to be dealing with this. But again, if you go with a clean $5 a month GoDaddy or HostGator or whatever shared hosting plan, and this mail function should work fine for you. Now, if you are worried about spam issues or anything like that, your email message is not going through, one of the classes, one of the videos we will do in the future is using something such as like a SendGrid API in order to send emails. So in order to send an email, right now we're using the mail function within PHP. You can also use SendGrid's API. So we take all that post information, we dump that into a format that SendGrid understands, and then we can actually send out an email, an SMTP email, through SendGrid's infrastructure. But then that requires us then going into the SendGrid API and setting up for the SendGrid API and blah, 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 blah. So one thing that I would tell you if you're thinking about using something like this in, again, a production environment, I would really say take the time and energy to learn how to integrate SendGrid. I think SendGrid is free for up to 100 email messages a day, something like that. I would argue if I was going to do this in production, I would probably integrate SendGrid into the system. You'll probably get better results for being able to send out emails and make sure everything is good and you don't run into any kind of weird problems. So with that, as always, I enjoyed doing this video and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.